Deep within the forest, a search team combs through dense trees, desperately looking for a missing couple. Hidden beneath the ground, inside a shadowy cave where a single bell hangs from the ceiling, two tracking dogs stumble upon a dark pool of water. Drawn by instinct, they drink from it. Not long after, their owner notices something strange. The dogs sit perfectly still, staring at each other without blinking. Even locked inside their cage that night, they refuse to break their gaze. Hours later, disturbed by unsettling sounds, the man rushes to check on them. The two animals have grotesquely merged into a single twisted body. Elsewhere in the city, Millie, a school teacher, and Tim, a struggling musician, throw a farewell party before moving away. During the celebration, Tim's former bandmates reveal they've been hired for a tour, and without thinking, Tim agrees to join them again, even though it means constant travel from their new home. Quietly, Millie's best friend pulls her aside and warns her that Tim has become distant and depressed ever since his career failed. Still, Millie insists the move will bring them closer. When it's time for their goodbye speech, Millie suddenly drops to one knee and jokingly proposes with an imaginary ring. Tim is completely stunned and leaves everyone hanging in awkward silence until Millie stands back up. Only then does he mutter an uncertain yes. That night in bed, Tim apologizes, saying he froze out of shock. Millie, however, remains hurt. She accuses him of pulling away and even wonders if he wants to end the relationship, admitting it's the first time he's ever made her feel unsure about them. Tim swears he loves her and wants to stay together. But when she tries to get close, he turns her down. As they settle into silence, Millie jokes that everyone knows he needs her more than she needs him, adding that blaming her won't fix his failures. Tim rolls onto his side, watching her back as she tells him to get rid of them. When he turns forward again, he's horrified to see a crying woman and a dead man standing at the foot of the bed, while the room itself seems to shrink around him. Panicked, he hides under the covers as the woman's face crawls closer. Then he jolts awake. It was only a nightmare. At their new house, Tim nervously asks Millie if she thinks he resents her. She brushes it off, confused by the question. While unpacking, Tim finds a box of his father's old tools. Soon, a terrible smell spreads through the house. Following it upstairs, he traces it to a lamp. Reaching inside, he pulls out a dead rat, only to realize there are more, their tails grotesquely tangled together. One of them suddenly squeaks, dying in his hand. Horrified, Tim throws the bodies into the forest. The next day, Millie starts her new job at the local school and quickly befriends Jamie, another teacher who lives nearby. Jamie mentions that if she ever wants to explore the area, he'd be happy to show her around. That evening, Tim asks Millie to drive him to a gig, but she can only take him as far as the train station. Later, when she tries to initiate intimacy, he rejects her again. The following morning, the couple sets out on a hike. Their path ends abruptly, but Tim notices another trail marked with bells hanging overhead. Convinced the bells mean it's safe, he leads the way. They linger in the forest until rain begins to pour, forcing them to run for shelter, only to realize they are lost. Tim pulls out his phone to check the compass, but he can't figure out which direction leads home. As he presses forward, he suddenly slips into a hidden hole, catching himself at the edge just in time. Millie rushes to pull him up, but she isn't strong enough. Both tumble down into the darkness of a cave. Tim's phone shatters on impact, and Millie has no signal. A heavy stillness surrounds them, yet both feel an unsettling sense that the cave isn't empty. When Tim lights his lighter, he reveals old, broken furniture scattered around. Desperate, he smashes the wood to build a fire, but the damp pieces refuse to catch. Their water supply is nearly gone, so Tim gives Millie what's left in the bottle while he drinks directly from a murky pool on the cave floor. Moments later, they manage to coax a fire to life and open a bottle of alcohol Tim had brought along. The tension eases slightly as they share a drink and admit almost guilty that they've both started smoking again. Passing a cigarette between them, Millie asks how Tim was able to recognize the smell of the rats so quickly. Tim hesitates, then explains. As a boy, his father had often complained of a stench in his room. No matter how thoroughly they cleaned, the odor never went away. One afternoon, Tim came home from school to find his father holding a dead rat that had been nesting inside the lamp. Every time Tim switched on the light, the heat slowly cooked the corpse. The change had been so gradual that he hadn't realized the smell was different from before. Tim's voice breaks as he recalls the day he discovered his father's body lying lifeless beside his mother, who sat smiling blankly on the bed. Her mind had snapped waking up next to her dead husband. Just like Tim with the rat, she had grown immune to the smell. By the time he finishes, Tim is in tears. In the middle of the night, strange noises wake him. Panic builds as he hears something moving in the darkness. A beast drawing near. Forcing himself to breathe, he realizes the sounds echo from the cave walls themselves, swelling and contracting in rhythm with his chest. As the stone seems to close in on him, Millie starts panting beside him. Suddenly, hands clamp down on his face. Then, he jolts awake, realizing it was another nightmare. Beside him, Millie's phone has taken water damage overnight. They rise only to feel a strange sensation along their legs. Pulling back the blanket, they discover their limbs stuck together by a viscous, sticky substance. A sharp pull is enough to tear them apart, but the sticky residue clings stubbornly to their skin. The separation leaves their legs raw and bleeding, and the pain follows them as they climb out of the cave, finally guided by the pale light of morning. Back at the house, Millie asks Tim for a massage. He hesitates, then places his hands on her back. At first, the touch feels intimate and reassuring, but his fingers soon begin pressing too hard, digging into her muscles. Millie cries out and pushes him away. Tim looks pale and unwell, though he insists he's just exhausted. Later, Millie drives into town, leaving Tim alone. He steps into the shower when suddenly his body stops obeying him. Every movement Millie makes behind the wheel is mirrored in him. When she turns, his body twists violently. When she drives straight, he slams again and again into the shower walls and glass door. As she accelerates down the road, he's hurled so hard against the tiles that they begin to crack. At last, the spell breaks. Tim collapses to the floor, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Shaken, he visits a doctor. The first thing the man brings up is Tim's mother and her history of mental illness. Tim immediately rejects the comparison. The doctor prescribes a muscle relaxant, explaining it should calm his body even if his mind is spiraling, hopefully stopping whatever dangerous feedback loop is happening. Almost casually, the doctor adds that Tim and Millie are lucky. The previous couple who lived in their house disappeared without a trace. Back home, Tim searches the internet. He discovers that the missing couple had gone hiking and were never found. The search parties eventually gave up, but their social media accounts remain frozen in time. Tim scrolls through their photos obsessively until, with a hollow laugh, he tells Millie to delete his profiles if he ever dies. That evening, Jamie comes over for dinner. During the meal, Tim asks about the bells in the forest. Jamie explains they once belonged to a New Age church that collapsed years ago. The conversation drifts, and soon Millie and Tim start teasing each other. The jokes slowly turn sharp, and an uncomfortable tension fills the room. Trying to lighten the mood, Jamie awkwardly comments that they complete each other. After Jamie leaves, Tim points out that it's obvious their guest likes Millie. Then, without warning, he kisses her with sudden, desperate force. The kiss intensifies, his hands wandering until Millie tries to pull away, only to realize their lips are stuck together. With a painful jerk, she tears herself free, convinced he bit her. Tim denies it, insisting that something has been wrong with them ever since they moved into the house. Millie dismisses it as another excuse, another way for him to avoid real intimacy. Later that night, Millie wakes to a strange tugging on her scalp. At first, she thinks Tim is lying on her hair. But when she switches on the light, terror floods her. Tim is gripping her, strands of her hair vanishing into his mouth, sliding down his throat as if something inside him is trying to swallow her whole. Millie screams and starts pulling, pain ripping through her scalp as Tim jolts awake in a panic. Gagging, he claws at his throat while she drags the tangled mass free. Together, they finally tear the hair out. It slithers onto the mattress and goes still. In the morning, Tim keeps spitting out strands, retching at the bitter taste. Millie begs him not to go to his gig, convinced he's unraveling. Tim refuses, saying he wasn't himself and doesn't want to talk about it. Reluctantly, she drives him to the train station. Before he leaves, she hugs him, wishes him luck, and suggests he stay with friends for the night, hoping distance from the house might help both of them. As Millie drives away, Tim's panic grows. He takes his pills, but they do nothing. When the train arrives, his body simply won't move. He abandons his instruments and stumbles back toward town, his skin burning as if he's on fire from the inside. At school, Millie notices a disturbing drawing from one of her students. Two dogs are sketched with their faces fused together. The image unsettles her deeply. After class, she spots Tim standing in the yard. He looks feverish, hollow. Alarmed, she rushes him into the nearest bathroom. He clings to her, whispering how much he missed her, then kisses her. Overwhelmed and desperate, they slip into a stall and finally give in to each other. When it's over, terror sets in. Their bodies are fused at the groin. Every attempt to separate sends waves of unbearable pain through them. Suddenly, a child's voice echoes outside the stall. They freeze, barely breathing, until the boy leaves. Shaking, Millie covers Tim's mouth, whispers an apology, and forces herself away. The separation is violent, leaving both of them bleeding and gasping. A knock comes almost immediately. Jamie's voice calls from outside. Tim scrambles onto the toilet tank as Millie flushes and steps out, trying to look normal. Jamie explains the boy heard strange noises and went to fetch him. Noticing blood on Millie's leg, he awkwardly assumes it's her period and reminds her staff should use the private bathroom. As he turns to leave, his eyes catch Tim's leg dangling from inside the stall. Back home, everything explodes. Millie screams at Tim, accusing him of nearly destroying her life. Tim fires back, saying he never forced her into anything. But Millie doesn't stop. She says he's slowly ruining everything she worked for. When Tim reminds her he left the city for her job, she snaps that he never had a real life there to begin with. If he feels so trapped, she tells him he should just leave. Tim shakes his head. He can't. His body and mind no longer feel separate. They don't obey him anymore. Millie's expression hardens. She says living with him feels like living with something already dead, just like his mother. Then she storms out. Moments later, she arrives at Jamie's house and breaks down. He gently lets her in. Over tea, she confesses everything about her failing relationship. Jamie listens quietly, then tells her an old story. According to legend, humans were once born with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces. Fearing their power, Zeus split them in half, condemning them to spend their lives searching for their missing part. After a long pause, Jamie admits he once had a husband but left him, a choice he now deeply regrets. As he speaks, Millie glances toward the window and freezes. Tim is standing outside, watching. Startled, she makes an excuse and leaves. Tim catches up to her in the street, takes her hand, and apologizes. That night, Tim scrolls through his phone, staring at the pile of unanswered messages from his band. He can't bring himself to reply. Instead, he opens the last photo ever posted by the missing couple. It shows them hiking, smiling. He checks the location tag and feels his stomach drop. The coordinates match the cave. As he zooms in, the screen glitches. The internet cuts out. Suddenly, a violent crash slams into the door, knocking Tim out of his chair. When he looks up, terror grips him. Millie is pressed against the glass, smearing blood across it. Her face is streaked red, her body jerking as if she's trying to force her way inside. Then, impossibly, she begins to rise, floating upward. Tim feels himself lifting too, pulled by the same unseen force. Summoning every ounce of strength, he lunges forward and yanks the door open. Millie collapses into his arms, limp and unconscious. He slaps her cheeks until her eyes flutter open. Dazed, she insists she doesn't remember anything. In the kitchen, still shaking, Millie suggests it might have been a seizure or sleepwalking. But Tim is convinced it's something else. He says the cave changed him, and now it's spreading to her. He fears they'll disappear just like the previous owners. Tim proposes an experiment. They should touch hands and see what happens. Millie refuses and storms toward the door. Suddenly, she freezes mid-step. Tim whispers that she didn't stop. His body did. He describes a pull, a hunger in their bones, something inside them that's bonded them together. He wants to go back to the cave for answers, but Millie brushes him off, reminding him her parents are visiting. Then she leaves, not noticing the blood she spilled slowly soaking into the wooden table. That night, they sleep in separate rooms. Hours later, Tim wakes in terror. His body is being dragged across the floor by an invisible force. He claws at the boards, fighting, until he manages to grab the wall and tear himself free. Another door shakes violently and bursts open. Millie's body bends backward unnaturally as she's pulled down the hallway, her limbs twisting at impossible angles. Tim is dragged too. When their hands finally meet, both scream in agony. Skin splits. Arms begin to fuse. Bones crack loudly in the dark. Tim remembers the medicine and shouts for Millie to reach the drawer. Their half-joined arms slam into it, knocking it over. The impact strikes Millie on the head, but she stays conscious. Desperate, they grab the bottle and swallow as many pills as they can. Panicking, Tim wonders if crushing the pills and snorting them will work faster. They try it, and the sharp burn of the powder brings a brief sense of relief. Then they press their feet together, pushing with all their strength. Agony shoots through their bodies, but slowly, their arms begin to separate. Before they can fully break apart, exhaustion overwhelms them and they collapse into unconsciousness. The next morning, Tim wakes to find Millie tying him to a chair with duct tape. Their arms are still partially fused, though the medication seems to have slowed the process. They both take a long swig of whiskey to steady their nerves. Millie brings out a small electric saw. At first, she loses control when she switches it on, but she quickly regains focus. With shaking hands, they begin cutting through the fused flesh. Their screams fill the house as pain tears through them, but finally, their arms separate. Bleeding and barely able to breathe, they collapse onto the floor, eating snacks just to keep themselves conscious. Realizing their medicine is running out, they decide they must go to the hospital. But Millie suddenly remembers she left the car keys at Jamie's house. She has no choice but to go back. At Jamie's place, Millie doesn't notice that the bell on the door carries the same symbol she saw hanging in the forest. When Jamie doesn't answer, she lets herself inside to search for the keys. Her attention is drawn to the flickering glow of an old television. On the screen plays footage from Jamie's wedding, filmed inside the sunken New Age church. Behind the priest hangs a disturbing mural. Two human figures fused into one. The video grows darker. The guests are shown dragging Jamie and his husband into a cave and sealing them inside on purpose. The truth becomes clear. This was never an accident. It was a ritual. Suddenly, Jamie appears behind Millie, dressed in cult-like clothing. His body is no longer fully human. It is the fused result of two people. Calmly, he explains that not every couple survives the ritual. Her hand and slices her skin with the sharp edge of his ring. Millie screams and punches him, breaking free. The impact causes Jamie's face to split open, revealing the two original faces beneath, still merged together. Yet he keeps speaking. Millie ignores him and runs. Meanwhile, Tim arms himself with a flashlight and rope and heads back to the cave alone. The ground feels sticky beneath his feet. As he moves deeper, he notices the same grotesque mural painted along the walls. Without warning, a hand bursts from the darkness and drags him to the floor. His jacket sticks to the slimy surface as a deformed shape pulls itself from the wall. A fused couple, twisted and incomplete. A failed version of the ritual. The creature inches closer. Tim shines his light into its face, forcing it to recoil. Its empty eyes seem to beg for help, but Tim notices a knife embedded in its neck. He rips it free and slashes at its fingers, creating just enough space to escape and run back into the darkness. Back at the house, Tim and Millie arrive at the same time, instinctively keeping their distance. But the invisible force immediately pulls them toward each other, twisting their bodies unnaturally. They grab onto furniture, door frames, anything they can to resist. Then Tim suddenly understands what he has to do. He releases his grip and slowly walks toward Millie. When she lets go as well, he drops to one knee and pretends to offer her an invisible ring. They share a quiet, emotional confession of love, realizing there is no real escape. Tim pulls out the knife and declares that he will end his own life to break the curse. But before he can act, blood from Millie's wounded arm drips onto the floor and begins crawling up his body, binding them again. Millie collapses into his arms. Moments later, Millie wakes up inside the house. She looks down and realizes Tim has fused their arms together deliberately, sacrificing himself to keep her alive. He plays her favorite song and they begin to undress, holding each other as they slowly dance. As they kiss, their bodies continue merging. The process is painful, grotesque, and irreversible. When the internet comes back on, Tim notices the last photo he ever posted online. It shows the two of them standing in front of their new home, smiling. That weekend, Millie's parents arrive and ring the doorbell. The door opens to reveal a single being. A perfect fusion of Millie and Tim. No longer two people, but one, finally whole, finally together.